Trigger warning, sexual violence. Diane, it's September 22, 2022. It's time to tell you the story of the two witches. One of them, I'll call her the Red Queen, was my best friend for a while, after you left. She was older, and I looked up to her a lot. She wore the sorts of outfits Amanda Dern might wear. Extravagant corset dresses, top hats, always blood red hair and lipstick. She was always drinking, laughing, and telling stories. Always complimenting my art, telling me how I was the only artist besides herself that she really admired and undisclosed. That was around the time we were having art night every Sunday night. We would invite all the potential censored members we could think of and have a great time making art, and there was always plenty of Obical P&N to go around. She was helping Nikita and I make a podcast, too, encouraging us with her enthusiasm and extroversion. A new best friend, completely different from you, of course, but nevertheless, someone to fill the void, maybe even a mentor. Plant Boy had confided in me that he liked girls who didn't wear makeup or do anything fancy to their appearance. These standards apparently went out the window one night when Plant Boy and the Red Queen had sex on the balcony. Nikita and I were more amused than anything, though we later agreed not to let that sort of thing happen again. Ever since the hookup, Plant Boy and the Red Queen were joined at the hip. The Red Queen, Nikita, Plant Boy, and I all got very close and decided to get an apartment together. We were enamored with the idea of having a real art house to throw parties in without the inconvenience of roommates on different schedules. We knew everybody in the house we were moving into, and it felt like our censored was truly starting to form. Then, disaster struck. We started to notice that the Red Queen was drinking a lot. She was driving drunk the 45 minutes from her place and back to get us. Then one day she was working on the podcast with Taryn Zamora/Hank, who was apparently driving her crazy, and she smashed his roommate's drum set in a fit of rage. She came to us, expecting us to be sympathetic, but Nikita and I were more shocked than anything. This was when shit really hit the fan. On New Year's of 2018, we tried to bring up the fact that she drank quite a bit, and that since Nikita had a history of addiction, it might not be safe for her to live in the same floor as us. Although we attempted to approach the situation with as much tact as possible, the Red Queen's rage exploded. "Don't you dare splain me to me," she kept saying before stomping out of our apartment. I texted her the next day, doing my best to try to smooth things over, but didn't receive a reply. The day after, Nikita and I were met with a letter, 10 pages detailing how we were manipulative, conniving psychopaths who lived in our own echo chamber of mutual affirmation while callously ignoring any damage caused by our actions. This being several years later, I am unable to find the document, but it contained accusations that it was people like us who had caused massive tragedies like the Cuban Missile Crisis. Although I still liked the Red Queen's personality and missed her company, I had to admit to myself that the 10-page letter detailing what a horrible person I am is a deal breaker in any friendship. I didn't speak to the Red Queen after that. Nikita's and my living arrangements had been abruptly uprooted, so we went with our only option and moved into Nikita's mother's apartment for a time. During the time of art parties and fun, we had met an interesting character, Snow. She arrived with a couple friends, and I was immediately struck by her beauty. Her blue-green hair looked like underwater seaweed framing her delicate face. We started to talk about our mutual love of slime videos, which soon segued into the fact that we happened to have a giant bucket of glittery turquoise slime, and we soon decided to lay down a tarp and pour the slime all over Snow. Was it art, a ritual, a game with no clear objective or rules of any kind? Who knows? Like everything else, it was just a thing we decided to do, and did. Snow stripped down to her underwear and stood tall in the middle of the room as Nikita and I took turns picking up the slime in our hands like water and dumping them on her until her body was covered in a glistening layer. The Red Queen was taking videos, which made Snow uncomfortable, and she asked her to stop, but the Red Queen was too drunk to notice, although to my knowledge, the footage never made it anywhere. After this strange happening, it was time for Snow to go home. We didn't hear from her until later, after the whole debacle with the Red Queen was over. Nikita and I were lamenting about the Red Queen's actions and the fallout, which had resulted in everybody else bailing out of our moving plans as well. So we only had a matter of 3 weeks to find 3 people to be our roommates. Stuck in the limbo of Nikita's mother's house, we were trying to lift our spirits by taking Oba-Cal-P, talking philosophy, and going into internet rabbit holes when I had the idea to invite Snow over. This wasn't the first time we had taken Oba-Cal-P with Snow, although the first time wasn't ideal. Snow had invited us over. Her room was meticulously decorated in bisexual mood lighting and basically anything you'd expect from the poster child of a beautiful goth woman. She had a bunny that looked like a cloud and let it hop around the house. Immediately, Snow warned us that she was more than one person and that she couldn't control when she switched. I was fascinated by this, which, in retrospect, probably led me to ignore the negative impression I had of her. I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was something off about her. Despite the obvious reason we would make a good friend group, her enthusiasm for slime, her aesthetic, her ambitions to start her own church, she was just like us. But still, Swim told me something wasn't right, and I ignored them. Snow gave us a brief rundown of her alter egos, their names, which ones were likely to come out, and what to expect from them if they did. One of them, the Albanian, she told us, was a persecutor, and if he came out, he would try to make Snow kill herself. If he came out, we were supposed to keep Snow from going into the room where the weapons were kept, using physical force if necessary. She told us we would know if the Albanian was out by his creepy smile, and demonstrated the smile, peering up at us with her pupils barely visible and grinning from ear to ear. I know all this sounds like it should have set off a lot of alarm bells, and maybe it did, but they were all subconscious, ringing with all their might just below the surface. She had the other side of me, the intellectual side, hooked, with no real sense of self-preservation. I have to admit that at first, I didn't believe there could be more than one spirit inhabiting a single body. In training, I had learned that anybody who claims to have such a disorder is no doubt making it up, but a part of me still wanted to play along with her antics, curious about where they might lead. She told us it was weird. She had memories that couldn't possibly be hers. A memory from when she was a baby, looking up at her Japanese mother, for example. Snow was white. I offered to do a forensic sketch of her birth mother. Then we could post it online and see if anybody could find her, but Snow declined for reasons she did not express. After we took the Oba-Cal-P, Snow became almost nonverbal. She would dissociate, then wake up again as a different person, and not know who we were, and Nikita and I would have to explain everything. She put on album after album of dark wave and sat on the floor, feeling the music in her body, closing her eyes and doing something between dancing and convulsing to the music. I remember being bored of the babysitting dynamic that had taken hold of our night, but it wasn't that bad. During one of her more lucid moments, Snow explained that having dissociative identity disorder was a blessing and a curse. For example, she had blacked out for 3 years and woken up in the middle of a conversation at the mall without even the foggiest memory of anything that had happened. That part scared me. But she also said that it made things easier because when she didn't want to go to work, she could just send April, her alter, out to work for her. My brain latched onto this idea like its life depended on it. It seemed so practical. Could the blessing part of plurality be manifested without the curse? I wondered. Of course, I didn't have time to wonder too much because soon Snow had thrown herself to the floor again and was shaking. The Albanian did surface and tried to get into the forbidden room, but Snow was pretty easy to restrain, and it felt more like a game or a show with audience participation than anything serious. Later, we learned that the god Empress, the girl who Hank told me was a sociopath, was Snow's ex. Did she fall on the floor shaking? The god Empress asked in an unimpressed tone. Yeah, she does that a lot. Incidentally, Hank was also the Red Queen's ex. If you look at the family tree of goths and punks in Undisclosed, you notice that it is incestuously rhizomatic as opposed to arboreal. So when the idea to invite Snow to Nikita's mother's house came up, I should have paused. I should have remembered the weird feeling I had around her, how she ate a bowl of mac and cheese in front of us but never offered us anything, and we eventually had to order pizza. But the Obical P was running through my veins, and I felt like nothing could possibly go wrong. Maybe I even thought I could cure whatever offness I had perceived, thinking that the Obical P would somehow bring out a more authentic version of Snow that Nikita and I would be able to really connect with. The last thing she sent us was a picture of her in a bath of slime. I imagined her as this ethereal creature who bathed in slime instead of water. Who was I to say no when faced with the offer of her presence? The last thing I sent her was the song Blue by MHOM, which she hadn't even answered to. Another thing that probably should have made me give pause about inviting her over, but it didn't. Snow showed up in a bad mood. My dom dumped me, she told us. Snow was polyamorous and kinky and was in all sorts of relationships, some of them having to do with her occupation as a submissive at a kind of dungeon, which is what she did when she wasn't working at Walmart. Nikita and I did our best to comfort her and tried to get her to explain the concept behind her church. She told us she had invented something called a waif culture with someone named Waffles, but it was unclear whether this person was physical or in her head. When I looked it up later, I found that waif culture had not been invented by Snow, but was actually its own subculture, something to do with being a wanderer, being skinny, and dressing more or less homeless. The only thing I could really figure out was that she had a brother with whom she got along splendidly and who she wanted us to meet, but that would never occur. For someone who wanted to start a church, it was odd that she seemed so shy when it came to talking about it. I gave up eventually, not wanting to pressure her too much. We told Snow what had happened between us and the Red Queen, and Snow said she had had a sense that Red was someone who shouldn't be trusted. We moved into the living room, and I had some alone time with Snow. So did you invite me to hang out, or did you invite me here to fuck? She asked mischievously. A little bit of both, I admitted. We started to take off our clothes and fool around, as Nikita calls it. I motioned to Nikita to join in, and everything was going fine for a moment. But then, out of nowhere, Snow started trying to strangle Nikita. This wasn't the first time this had happened. Nikita had been in the middle of trying to recover from PTSD, from the PTSD she had acquired from being suddenly and without warning choked by an ex-lover who she'd cut off from her life since. Everything happened so fast I barely had time to move. 1 minute, Snow had her hands around Nikita's neck, and the next, Nikita had somehow knocked Snow onto the floor. Snow switched again, allegedly not knowing what had just happened. Fists pounded on the inside of my head. I recalled the idea of an alter coming out to do something the original personality doesn't want to do. I was still frozen. Nikita was actually comforting Snow, probably more to secure her own safety than anything else. I was still frozen. Snow went to the bathroom. Nikita asked me if I was okay, and I remember nodding yes automatically. I approached the bathroom. Snow was evidently trying to stay. She was trying to get us to brush off the whole incident. Maybe in another situation she would have had the power to do that, but this force inside of me was livid. Sure, Snow hadn't known about Nikita's trauma, but she had never asked. She had spent the whole time talking about herself, just like last time we tried to hang out with her. If we had talked about anything of substance, I'm sure Nikita's trauma would have come up. But even if Nikita didn't have trauma, in what universe is it okay to choke someone without asking for any kind of consent, then trying to brush it off 5 minutes later because you allegedly don't remember. I need you to leave, I said. It said. Snow was done using the bathroom, but now she was sitting on the toilet staring at the bath mat. This bath mat won't let me leave, she trailed off, still adventuring. Words came out of my mouth. I don't know what's going on in your head, but in real life, what just happened is that you just tried to strangle my girlfriend, and now you need to leave. Snow looked defeated. She lingered a little longer, grabbing her belongings from various places in the apartment. I stood standing, watching, tapping my fingers, which I don't do. 30 seconds of fun, she asked another of her strange rehearsed lines, innocently offering us each a stick of Fruit Stripes gum. We both took a piece. For some reason, I've thought a lot about the gum moment. What did it mean? Was it supposed to be a peace offering? Maybe, but she was leaving anyway. A test? Did we fail for mindlessly taking it? It could have been poisoned. She was right, the flavor did only last for 30 seconds. It turned out not to be poisoned, but I kept being bothered by it because it still could have been. There are several interactions involving gum in the DIA's secret texts. There's the part where the chief thanks McMurphy for a pack of gum and the whole gum motif and invitation to love. So it felt weird that gum was coming up again, only this time in real life. The thing in my head, my sister, Paige, my twin, sighing, glaring, tapping her fingers, ready to explode again, if need be, in her measured way. Snow got the message and left with her head down. She didn't know how she was supposed to get home while adventuring, but we didn't care. Nikita managed to keep her composure until Snow left. Then she broke down and lay in the bed, just intermittently staring at the wall and crying. The trauma was crushing her. What was supposed to be just a fun night was the seed for months of misery and despair. Hours upon hours of me holding Nikita as she told me how she didn't trust people anymore, and I didn't know what to say to change her mind because I was there too. Swim said to trust people still, but it was getting harder for me to listen. Hours and hours sitting silently next to Nikita, not touching her because it would remind her of one of the incidents. There's more I didn't even go into. That feeling when there are so many instances of sexual abuse, they don't fit into your story. Of course, Snow had been sexually abused too, damaged. She was just continuing the cycle. And here it was in Nikita's despair and my twin's rage. Later, I heard rumors about Snow telling people that breaking up couples was her effigy. At least she didn't break Nikita and I up, but she certainly left a mark. Taryn Zamora, aka Hank, who we must remember rarely tells the truth, later told me that before Snow came out, she had been married. Hank told me that he was sure that after the divorce, Snow had effectively become her ex-wife, or at least meticulously copied her likeness. Later, when I messaged her about the incident, she told me her and her therapist had discovered the culprit was a new alter, Jack the Strangler or something like that. Sometimes I wonder if she did it on purpose, if Snow was trying to traumatize me so that I would get her blessing/curse, because it all starts with trauma. If that was the intent, it worked. When I first met Snow, as I said before, I didn't believe her. But when I started to think about it more deeply, I started to realize going through life lying to everyone all the time, it would be impossible, wouldn't it? Occam's razor dictates that when in doubt, one should choose the explanation with the least amount of assumptions, and in this case, that would be that Snow was telling the truth, that her imagination was really allowing her to manifest multiple personalities, multiple selves, and erasing her memory depending on which one had any given experience. It made me think of my college essay, the one that got rejected for obvious reasons that made me sound insane. I was trying to convey the transcendental feeling I experienced when writing. To me, it felt less like I was creating the characters and situations myself, and more like I was communing with spirits that inspired me. I wondered if those same spirits were taking over Snow's body. Still, a person needs accountability. Snow couldn't simply get off the hook for assault because a spirit had possessed her, could she? These questions are hard to think about, and even harder to answer. For a long time, Nikita was afraid of Paige, linking her arrival to the trauma with Snow. But Nikita and Paige shared a strange bond that made it hard for Nikita to dislike her. I don't want to say that Nikita is over the fact that Paige is here, but after a brief period of denial, she has ultimately accepted it. I'm sorry it had to be this way. A part of me wishes I could be normal for everyone who had those aspirations for me. But I wouldn't give Paige up for the world. She's my twin, and I don't know what I would do without her. I hope that story wasn't too much of a downer. Snow and the Red Queen were far from the only people who traumatized Nikita and I that year. Forgive me for glossing over this next part, but it's painful and long, and I want to get through it as quickly as possible. After the whole debacle, we tried to move in with 2 housemates, but one of them turned out to be a rapist, so that situation was ruined. Nikita and I moved back in with Nikita's mother, but Nikita and her mother began fighting nonstop. This was around the time of the pandemic. The whole thing made me so depressed. I had to go to the psych ward. Nikita and I even broke up for a short period. Anyway, I stayed in the psych ward for a month. Afterwards, Nikita and I moved into an apartment together, and things have more or less gone back to normal. Friends have come and gone, many of whom I thought would be relevant to the project, and they still might be, but we've drifted apart nonetheless. There is one other person besides Nikita who we are spending time with, though. Her name is Graziella. We are currently living in a throuple with her. Graziella makes her own movies and casts me and Nikita in them. She is a beautiful genius, and I'm afraid to mention her here since so many people I've mentioned here get jinxed. But Swim tells me not to give credence to those suspicions. Mom is very suspicious, warning me not to mention people I care about, but I don't listen to her. I only listen to Swim. Nikita, Graziella, and I are planning to buy a house together in the suburbs, and Nikita and I are planning to get married. Yes, I know, it's very basic, but to be fair, our censor needs some sort of a base, and a house would be perfect for our purposes. We go to plenty of basement punk shows in the area, and our goal would be to create a similar sort of venue. Nikita and I have a lot of crazy friends, for lack of a better way to say it. High-intensity individuals, friends who may be too intense to hang out with for a long period of time, but we would nevertheless consider them more than acquaintances. These people make up what we call the outer circle of the censored, with Graziella, Nikita, and I on the inside. These are people I want to take to the Grey Lodge and just watch them let loose. I want to bring people who can magic away the fake capitalist aura of the place. Agents of chaos, too many to keep track of at once, and there's no telling what they'll do. They probably won't break any explicit rules, but their presence will be noticed and felt. Swim accepts everybody, and so should the Grey Lodge, if it truly wants to connect with Swim. Bringing the wretched of the earth will force the Grey Lodge to show its true colors, if you'll forgive my pun. Anyway, that's all I have for now. More soon. Thanks for listening. Yours, Dale.